Okay. So I think I'm actually technically 6 steepings in, but 2 of those steepings, 4 and 5, I pushed for 30 seconds and then a minute. And I did throw out the first 2 rinses of this tea. And then I just had some water and get the water started here and let this hang out for a little bit too much water. That should be fine. Let this hang out for, I don't know, some time. I guess I'll turn on the timer for everybody. See if I can do that. And had some water. And I'm just sort of noticing how that Huigan really comes back. And one thing that I really enjoy about these semi-aged raw teas is that returning sweetness has sometimes an oolong-y character to it. Kind of a really sweet, slightly baked wood flavor. And it's really really nice. One other thing I watched a couple of my episodes, which I don't do, but I was just curious, like, how stupid do I sound? And mostly stupid. But what's funny is to notice that as I go through the session, that especially here in the Dennysodes, where I'm not having paused to wait for James, where I'm drinking more tea, or I've had more tea in the day probably because I'm filming a lot more, my mouth gets puckered from the astringency and it's harder and harder to talk. It's funny. So even though I have a really bright light shining on this right now, it's a little bit hard to get the character of the color in the. I think one thing I'm learning more and more about puerh tea is about sheng puerh tea is it really matters. The color is really meaningful. Let me see if I can get a flashlight going on here. It's again so blue. It's really kind of messing with the color grading on it, but let's see if we can get closer. So in reality, while these look greener on camera, these are a bit paler and a bit browner. The stems, they're pretty uniform in color. Some leaves are a bit oranger, some are a bit greener. They all have a pale complexion. I guess so. This is kind of like, you know, if you were to make a green tea out of this, it would still have kind of a pale complexion if you were to make it fresh, apparently, according to some blogs that I've read. So there is something about the actual leaves themselves that are going to be specifically good for puerh tea. You can't just make, I mean, you can process all tea leaves with puerh processing, but to have puerh processing with, that's about as close as I can get us, sharpness, to have long-term storage processing for puerh really requires a different kind of material. Not a dig on Steve in any way, but I went through a recent puerh tea produced in 2025 that, again, it probably was mostly because I was chasing it after drinking a really intense sheng tea, but it only tasted like green tea to me. And so short term, you can make a young raw tea that is really delicious and has some diesel and base to it. But I guess long term, you want to be finding leaf material that might have a bit of a paler complexion after the kill green step, the partial enzymatic, ceasing of activity, versus a sort of brighter green character. Let me pause and see if I can find some green tea and maybe show what maybe this looks like a little bit. Okay, not going to do it. Looked around, but it's going to derail the episode too much, so apologies on that. But anyway, learning a bit more, as I said, about the complexion of the leaves. This gaiwan is pretty much stuffed. I'm using 5.5 grams for 51 milliliters of space in this gaiwan when it's full. See if we can get it. And steeping 8. Cheers. It's harder to focus on steepings, later steepings with the same intensity as the first steepings, right? Physiologically as well, just because your mouth is so used to the flavors, it's hard to sort of taste them afresh. So taking a break and having a sip of water and spending 5 minutes away from the tea and then coming back, this is kind of what I've done. And I'm noticing it's not like it's much worse than the first steepings, of course. It's different and much worse. It's different. It's lacking a lot of the front viscosity that I really enjoy from a tea like this. But it has a nice finishing kind of juicy mouth puckering. It's not even mouth puckering, just kind of a juiciness to it. It has like a nice sweetness to it. It's cooling. It's got like a really nice herbaceous, kind of, yeah, mint family kind of a vibe happening. I let the tea sit too long. It was too cold. But the texture, so if the first steeping was a 10 of 10 on the texture, really kind of so in my case, it was the longest steep that I did. The first long steep I did had the most body and texture and bitterness, of course. Comparing sort of that as kind of a 10 of 10 max volume, this is a 3 of 10, 4 of 10. It still has a bitterness. More hay notes on this. A lot of the sweetness has faded. I'm noticing kind of more of that almost dusty yerba mate base on this. Tastes really clean to me. Boiling water. Cooling for sure. I'll pause and bring you guys back in a minute and a half, 2 minutes. I feel like the sweetness comes later on these later steepings. And if I hadn't stopped and taken a break, my mouth would feel different because the astringency has been definitely relieved a little bit with the water and the break. So I probably would have more of a rounder taste to these teas right now, as well. So when I'm first retasting this, it starts out as kind of like a earthy, bitter undertone, but then sitting here a minute later, a really nice subtle balancing. It's hard to say this, but like just subjectively, it's just like the flavors I'm just still tasting them, and they have changed over the course of a minute just sitting here. And what a treat. I mean, what a strange and wonderful experience to be having tea like that. Certainly, tea tastes really great first thing, right? Kind of first sip, change, novelty, boom, lots of different stimulus. But kind of really trying to be focused on tea at this point of the tea. What does tea taste like when you're brewing it for 3 minutes? And this is, I'll be honest, maybe not a tea that really deserves tons of studied attention, steepings 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, whatever, right? But having this kind of a mentality about tea I think is interesting, at least as an experiment, something to try on, something that's certainly worth practicing on tea that might not be as nice, so that when you do get to once in a lifetime teas, you're equipped and prepared to brew them excellently, really experience the depth and flavor and lasting flavors and notes. And I'm not so in on the tea energy key thing, Chachi. I don't know, but how it affects you, right? Really being in how it affects you. It's brewing up dark still. See if I can get some of the particulate at the bottom of the cup there. It's hard to see, but it still looks almost a little bit cloudy. A lot of, again, this is pretty stuffed, and all the little just pieces make their way out. Don't use a strainer, although you're certainly welcome to. Cheers. It's really worth paying attention on these steeps because there is movement here. Really nice fruit appearing. Kind of tropical. Something in there. Quite sweet now. Still plenty of base. You know, again, my complaint, and it's not a complaint, it's just learning, is that these steepings get a little disappointing on the really crazy rich intensity of the mouthfeel. It's one thing that I think distinguishes Japanese gyokuro from other teas, kind of by a logarithmic jump. It's just the roundness of this flavor in its intersection in the mouthfeel is, again, maybe more about the bitter stringency of this tea influencing physically my mouth with all the tannins and catechins and things like that that are still present in this tea. I'm excited to drink this in like 15 years. It's gonna be really nice. The fruitiness on this is really, really lovely. Continues to be really tasty. All right, I'm gonna do another one. I'm gonna pause and come back, but I'll start the timer and get the water going. Yeah, you know, I think one of the things that's special about going to a tea shop by yourself or with a specific tea friend who is willing to sit there in silence and experience the tea a bit is these moments where you're really focused on these steeps still. You know, you would brew out a special tea that was worth, I don't know, a lot of money, let's say. You're spending a lot of money for one sample and session in person. You would want to brew it out for a long time and experience it and still notice it. And this is a nice exercise for me because sitting here, yeah, I'm still really noticing the sweetness on this. It's come back even stronger. It's really pleasant. Still a lot of astringency in my mouth, but I am I don't know if you guys heard that one upstairs. Experimenting more with pushing some of these teas, specifically teas that I think taste really, really pleasant today, pushing them. Really see how far they will go. So I typically use I started doing blind measuring where I would cover how many grams, the gram reading of my scale, and then just start weighing and seeing what it looks like. So for these ones, for ripe puerh, I typically always do 5 grams pretty reliably, and then For these, on average, I do about 4.2 to 4.5, something like that. The variance is higher. I don't have as good of a sense of these. I think one difference is that shung can come apart and be really loose and big, like the Naka that I filmed last episode. And so it's harder to just like literally, it's more like white tea where you're just stuffing big fluffy leaves in some sense into a gaiwan, and it's actually just hard to get physically all of the leaves in there. So you kind of have to rinse, compress to get the, enough of the material in. On those ones, I tend to be measuring about 4. So one thing that's worth noting too here, getting into this last steeping, is clay versus porcelain, gaiwan versus pot, thickness of the pot, how much total thermal mass is in the vessel. So using more total stuff, having a larger gaiwan, more water, more tea will create more thermal mass. It's going to all influence how the tea is extracted over time. So use that how you want, right? This might be less strong had I used clay, excuse me. But the earlier session, or steeps, excuse me, probably would have been richer and bigger. So use all of these variables to your advantage. And a big part of this tea learning for me is figuring out what variables to play with. And off camera, I use way different teaware than I do on camera, where I always pretty much am using a gaiwan that's white and wide mouthed. But I am thinking about maybe getting a pot or something like that. I just want to be able to really visually demonstrate these teas to you all. So, and it's really helpful for me to learn. So, yeah, just something to consider, right? This is a variable that doesn't represent itself on these episodes, but certainly does in my tea drinking and probably in yours. And you'd be having a different experience. And this is, again, kind of things to tinker with. Okay. So this is going to be cold. Kind of an ideal world. I could have this, like some little hot plate that heated it back up. Let's go ahead and give it a smell and see what we think on that. It's really mellowed out. A lot fruitier. All that kind of yerba mate and hay and diesel PD base but actually it's brewed out really pretty dark still. I mean, granted, 16-minute brew time. So, okay, this will be my last one. Cheers, everybody. Still really nice. Honestly, I think you could brew it out again. Give it a long enough time. It won't be, I mean, right now it's like lukewarm, so it won't be, it's a different thing, but you're still definitely experiencing the tea. Really nice, honestly. And again, learning a lot about the character of this tea through these later steepings. I think that if you're spending, I want to say like, I don't know, 50 cents a gram or more, would make sense, I think, to be trying to extract as much as you can out of the tea. That includes any kind of tea, white teas, green teas, whatever. And you might find out, wow, this is a 2 steeping green tea, and after that it is bad. But when I sit down for this green tea, I now know I'm going to have 2 focused steepings, really experience them fully, and then be done, let it rest. So again, it's kind of getting acquainted with styles of tea, processing, specific teas, specific ways of brewing them, how much extra, leaf to use versus not, things like that. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hey, subscribe. If you're watching this, you're not subscribed. What? Like, I don't even know how. I don't even know if that's physically possible. So much love. Hey, let me know in the comments how you do brew out your late steeping. Seriously, I meant that. I do want to know. That's not some like shilling algorithm BS. Please specifically write like as much detailed information as you can, or want to rather share. I want to read about it. Hope everyone's doing awesome. Peace.